Inside a dimly lit tent on the banks of the Volga River, 6 warriors wait in silence. The year is 922. A young girl steps forward. She already knows what will happen next. She has watched the ceremony before, but never from this place, never as the one being offered. Her name was Sigrid, though history will never record it. The Arab traveler watching through the thin fabric of the tent will later write only that she was young, that she was a slave, that she volunteered to follow her master into the afterlife. He will not write how long she had been enslaved. He will not write how choice had already been beaten out of her. One by one, the warriors approach. Outside the tent, voices rise in song, growing louder with each passing moment, not in celebration but to drown out the sounds that must not escape. When the 6th man leaves, Sigrid no longer speaks. The old woman they call the Angel of Death steps forward, holding a rope in one hand and a blade in the other. One to suffocate, one to make certain. Within minutes, Sigrid will burn beside the Viking chieftain who owned her in life and will own her in death. She is 19 years old, and in a cruel way she is lucky. She knows exactly when her suffering will end. Most women captured by Vikings were never given that mercy. What the Vikings created was not simple slavery. It was a system so deliberate, so efficient, and so brutal that Arab chroniclers, Byzantine historians, and Christian monks all described it as something they had never witnessed before. A machinery of human suffering, built specifically around women. This is the story they tried to forget. June 8, 793. The holy island of Lindisfarne off the coast of Northumbria. An hour ago, Sister Aldred had been copying manuscripts inside the scriptorium, surrounded by silence and prayer. Now she presses herself into a grain storage shed, lungs burning from dust, listening to sounds that should never exist inside monastery walls. Through the cracks in the wooden boards, she watches Vikings sorting the captives. Her friend Bridget is dragged by the hair toward the shore, where longships wait like open jaws. Bridget had once been admired for her auburn hair and gentle smile. Now that beauty has marked her for something worse than death. The Vikings separate women with the efficiency of farmers sorting livestock. The young and beautiful are placed in one group, the strong but older women in another. The sick and elderly are killed where they stand. Their bodies are left behind. A hand plunges into the grain beside Aldred, fingers close around her arm. The warrior who pulls her out smells of salt and blood. He shoves her into the line without a word. Aldred, who had devoted her life to Christ since the age of 14, is about to learn what Vikings do to captured women. The journey itself redefines suffering. 40 women are packed into a space meant for 20. No food for the first 2 days. Water only when waves crash over the side of the ship, forcing them to lick moisture from the wood that countless captives before them had also licked. By the 5th day, 2 women are dead. Their bodies are thrown into the sea without ceremony. By the 8th day, Aldred stops praying. God feels very far away inside this wooden coffin sliding across black water. The Vikings know exactly which women are destined for which fates. Even in the darkness below deck, selection has already begun. When the ship reaches Norway, the division happens immediately. The raid leader takes first choice. Then his warriors choose in order of reputation. Aldred is given to a farmer who needs labor. Bridget is taken to the chieftain's hall. Aldred believes her friend's fate must be better. She is wrong. Aldred will die 20 years later in Norway, hands permanently twisted from grinding grain, back bent beyond repair. Bridget lasts 3 months before being sold east, disappearing into the vast Viking slave networks that stretch from Ireland to Constantinople. No one ever hears from her again. This was not an isolated raid. Lindisfarne became the template for 3 centuries of terror. Viking ships could appear at any dawn. When they did, women knew their lives as human beings were over. After a successful raid on a Frankish village, a chieftain walks between rows of captured women kneeling in the mud. He lifts chins with a staff, inspecting faces, hands, hips, teeth. He sorts them into categories: laborers, breeders, and those reserved for special purposes. The laborers grind grain, work fields, and die early. The breeders produce children who inherit slavery through their mother's blood. The third group, the beautiful and noble, are cleaned, fed, taught languages, and prepared for sale in distant markets. This is not random violence. It is calculated harvesting. Viking slavery was an economy. A woman who could weave was worth 3 times more than one who could not. A woman who could read Latin might be sold to Byzantine households. A woman with healing knowledge could command extraordinary prices. Beauty increased value, but also suffering, because valuable women were sold again and again, moved endlessly to prevent attachment or resistance. Dublin became Europe's largest slave market. Women stood naked on platforms while auctioneers described their bodies in multiple languages. Noble lineage became a selling point. Virginity, assumed rather than proven, inflated prices. Buyers calculated futures in silver and bloodlines. A single woman might be sold 15 or 20 times in her life, moved farther from home each time, until she no longer remembered her own language. Children born in holding pens inherited slavery the moment they drew breath. Infant mortality exceeded 50%. Mothers were given days to recover before being sold again. This was industrialized human trafficking. In Iceland, slavery became something worse. Escape was geographically impossible. The island itself was a prison. Volcanoes, ice fields, endless ocean. Runaways were always recaptured. Punishment was calculated. Tendons cut so a woman could walk but never run. Enough pain to teach a lesson, never enough to destroy value. The law erased women completely. A slave woman had no legal existence. Her body belonged to her owner. Her children belonged to her owner. Harm done to her was property damage, compensated in silver. Her death was recorded like the loss of livestock. Guests could be offered access to her body as hospitality. Children born from such nights became property with no father, no identity. Freedom was theoretically possible after bearing multiple children who survived to adulthood. In practice, almost no one lived long enough to achieve it. Some women resisted. They poisoned masters slowly, disguising death as illness. They burned markets and slave pens, dying in the flames they lit. They killed their own infants rather than condemn them to bondage. They taught forbidden languages and prayers in whispers. They seduced, waited, and struck while men slept. Most paid with their lives. But their resistance created fear. The women Vikings enslaved were never safe. Any meal, any drink, any night could be the last. The system required constant vigilance, constant cruelty, constant terror. That terror became a weapon. Entire villages fled at the sight of Viking sails, abandoning homes and farms. Stories traveled faster than ships. A single atrocity could empty a region without a battle. The Vikings conquered not just with axes, but with reputation. Modern DNA tells the story Viking sagas tried to erase. In Iceland, most male ancestry is Scandinavian. Most female ancestry is Irish and Scottish. The Viking world was built on stolen women. The ships we admire in museums carried enslaved girls below deck. The gold artifacts were bought with silver earned selling human beings. The settlements that became modern nations were populated through forced reproduction. The Vikings we celebrate as explorers were also human traffickers. Their achievements were funded by women whose names were deliberately forgotten. Sigrid died in 922. She was 19, enslaved for 2 years, burned beside a man who owned her. She was one of hundreds of thousands. History did not record her name, but she existed. They all did. And the least we can do now is refuse to let their suffering remain invisible.